It's part of human nature to want to belong to something. We belong to a certain nationality or a culture. We belong to a certain group, associations. We belong to a certain family. And Jesus addresses what it means to belong to Him, to be a member of His company of followers. He gives various commandments such as love your enemy, do good to those who persecute you. But then He goes on to further expand upon what it means to stand out as His followers. And He states in the Gospel of Matthew, if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers and sisters only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? And Jesus there makes the distinction between what everyone else does and what we do. And it perhaps is an important thing to remember, because when you often hear various people in their commentary on maybe teachings of the Catholic Church or standards of Christianity, a lot of times they're going to say, well, that's not in line with majority opinion, or most people don't follow that anyway. And unfortunately, in some cases, they'll even say most Catholics don't follow that teaching, so the Church should just change those teachings. To us, Jesus would perhaps say, well, we are not everybody else. We are not the majority opinion. We are not secular progressive society. We are followers of Christ. We don't do what everyone else does. We don't do what the pagans do. We don't do what the proverbial tax collectors do. We do what He commands us to do. And so the consideration shouldn't be on what's popular or, dare I say it, politically correct, what is in line with majority opinion or what is currently trendy and modern, but rather what are the commands that Jesus gives us that we are obliged to follow. And the consideration should not be what everyone else does, because we don't belong to everyone else. We belong to Christ. One example of that during Lent is the practice of fasting and abstinence. It's not that we can't eat meat on Fridays, but that as Catholics, we don't eat meat on Fridays. It's something we do together as a community to which we belong. I like to make that comparison to shooting fireworks on the 4th of July and eating turkey on Thanksgiving. Why do we do it? Because it brings about a connection with everyone else who does that on those particular holidays. In the same way, we fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Not because we have to, but that's what we do. It's an obligation, but we also do it because we belong to a community of faith that is making an observance together as church. If we were to say, for example, well, I don't abstain from meat on Fridays because I don't get anything out of it. Well, Jesus would say, well, what's admirable about that? That's what everyone else does. But as followers of Christ, this is something we observe during Lent. The days of fasting, the days of abstinence, and the days of self-denial, the practices of self-denial in what we give up during Lent and the various practices we do as a matter of discipline, remembering that we're not in this alone. We belong to a community of faith. And so the next time we perhaps are tempted to maybe just blow off a traditional practice during Lent, we might remind ourselves it's not just about us. We belong to a community that is the church. Perhaps in exercising a little fraternal correction, if someone shares with us, well, I don't really follow that teaching because I don't get anything out of it, especially if practice this during Lent, we might remind them, well, it's not about just them. This is who we are as a people of faith. When it comes to the teachings of the church, especially the moral teachings that perhaps could be the most difficult and least palatable because of the pressures of a secular society, we remind ourselves of this particular passage. The pagans do the same. The tax collectors do the same. That's what everyone else does. That's what majority opinion thinks. But we're not majority opinion. We're not everyone else. We're not the tax collectors. We're not the pagans. We are followers of Christ. And as followers of Christ, we aren't too concerned with what everyone else does. We are concerned with following His lead and obeying His commands. And as an exercise, we engage in these practices to help us grow in that during this season of Lent.